I watched through the frosted window as my younger sister Madison squealed with joy, running toward the brand-new Honda CR-V, sitting in our driveway with an enormous red bow on top. It was Christmas morning, and my parents stood there beaming like they had just handed her the world. Then Mom called me over, handed me a ceramic piggy bank with 3 crumpled $1 bills stuffed inside, and smiled warmly. "That's our contribution to your future home." Dad nodded approvingly, adding that I should be responsible now. My phone buzzed immediately, a text from Mom. "Don't forget the utility bills are due on the 27th. I stood there in the living room, holding that piggy bank, feeling something crack open inside my chest. I was 26 years old. For the past 3 years, I had been living at home, working full-time at a medical billing office, and paying nearly half of my salary toward the household bills. Electric, gas, water, internet, cable. Mom said it was only fair since I lived there too. Meanwhile, Madison had spent those same 3 years partying her way through college, tuition fully paid by our parents, coming home only to do laundry and raid the fridge. The house erupted in celebration behind me. I could hear Madison on the phone, screaming to her friends about her new car. Dad was already outside taking pictures. Mom was in the kitchen starting Christmas breakfast, like this was the most normal thing in the world. Like giving one daughter a $25,000 vehicle, and the other daughter $3 was perfectly reasonable. I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom. My hands were shaking. I pulled 2 suitcases from my closet and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, important documents. I moved methodically, my brain strangely calm even though my heart was racing. I could hear them laughing downstairs. Nobody came to check on me. Nobody noticed. 20 minutes later, I carried my suitcases down the stairs. They were all outside now, posing with Madison's new car for more photos. I walked right past them, loaded my bags into my old 2008 Toyota with 180,000 miles on it, and got in the driver's seat. My hands gripped the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I could see Madison twirling her new key fob, could see my parents grinning with pride. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway. That's when Madison noticed. She pointed, laughing. Mom looked over, confused. I didn't stop. I just drove. My phone started ringing before I even reached the end of our street. I didn't answer. It rang 7 more times in the next 10 minutes. Text messages flooded in. "Where are you going? Don't be dramatic. Come back right now. You're embarrassing us." But I kept driving, my eyes blurry with tears I refused to let fall. I called my best friend Jenna. She answered on the second ring. "Merry Christmas. What's up? Can I come over?" My voice cracked. I just left home. "Of course. What happened? I'll tell you when I get there." I drove toward Jenna's apartment on the other side of town, my phone still buzzing incessantly. I needed to clear my head, needed to figure out my next steps. I had been saving money for years. I had an emergency fund. I could get my own place, start fresh, prove to myself and everyone else that I didn't need them. I stopped at my bank's ATM on the way, planning to check my account balance. I had been depositing money regularly from every paycheck. After 3 years, even with the bills I had been paying, I should have around $4,000 saved. Enough for first and last month's rent on a small apartment. Enough to get started. I inserted my card and checked my balance. The screen loaded. My stomach dropped. $217. That couldn't be right. I checked again, my fingers fumbling on the screen. I pulled up my transaction history. My eyes scanned the withdrawals. There were dozens of ATM withdrawals I had never made. $50 here, $80 there, $100, $60. All from ATM locations near my parents' house. All over the past 18 months. I scrolled further. My debit card had been replaced twice in the past year due to wear and tear. I had never requested replacements. I had never noticed because I used my card regularly, and it worked fine. But someone had been ordering new cards, intercepting them, using them to drain my account systematically. I stood at that ATM in the bank parking lot, Christmas morning, staring at the evidence of months of theft. My family. It had to be. They were the only ones who had access to the mail, the only ones who knew my routines, the only ones who would benefit from keeping me broke and dependent. My car started making a grinding noise as I pulled away from the bank. The check engine light flickered on. Perfect. Just perfect. I drove carefully to a mechanic shop I knew was open on holidays for emergencies. The mechanic took one look under my hood and shook his head. Transmission's going out. You need a rebuild. That's going to run you about $1,200. $1,200 I didn't have. With only $217 in my account, I couldn't afford to fix my car. I couldn't afford first and last month's rent. I couldn't afford anything. My phone buzzed again. Dad, this time. Where did you go? Stop being childish. Another text from Madison with 3 laughing emojis. Someone can't handle not being the center of attention. I drove my dying car to Jenna's apartment, the grinding noise getting worse with every mile. She met me at the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. Stay as long as you need, she said. The couch is yours. That night, lying on Jenna's couch in the dark, I got an email notification. My automatic bill payment for my parents' utilities had just processed. $163 withdrawn from my account. I now had $54 to my name. I had forgotten to cancel the automatic payments. And when I tried to log into the utility company's website to stop them, I discovered the password had been changed. The account was in my name, but I couldn't access it. I would have to call them during business hours, after Christmas, to sort it out. My phone buzzed one more time before I fell asleep. Mom's text, "You're being childish. Family is forever. We love you." But they didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them, and I was done. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of job applications and growing desperation. I settled into a routine on Jenna's couch. I would wake early, shower quickly, and head to the library to search for apartments I could afford, and jobs that paid better than my current position. Jenna was incredibly kind, but I could feel her boyfriend's resentment growing every time he came over and found me there. The apartment was tiny, a 1-bedroom barely big enough for 2 people, definitely not 3. My family called and texted constantly. At first it was anger, then guilt trips, then threats. Dad said I was tearing the family apart. Mom said I was being selfish and ungrateful. Madison sent mocking messages with pictures of her enjoying her new car, but the messages all had the same underlying theme. Come home. Pay your share. Be responsible. Take care of us. I blocked their numbers after the 4th day, but they started calling from other phones. Friends' numbers, neighbors' numbers, even numbers I didn't recognize. Each time, the same script. You owe us. We raised you. Family takes care of family. At work, I kept my head down and focused on being the best employee I could be. I had been working at the medical billing office for 4 years. I was reliable, accurate, and fast. My performance reviews had always been excellent. I was hoping for a promotion to senior billing specialist, a position that would come with a $5,000 raise. That raise could change everything for me right now. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after Christmas, my supervisor, Mr. Patterson, called me into his office. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes who had always been fair with me. But today, he wouldn't make eye contact. "Carly, please sit down," he said, his voice tight. I sat, my stomach already knotting with dread. "I'm sorry to do this, but we're going to have to let you go, effective immediately." The words didn't make sense at first. What? Why? Did I do something wrong? Mr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It's not about your work performance. Your work has always been excellent. But we've been receiving some very concerning phone calls over the past 2 weeks. Phone calls? From your mother." He pulled out a folder. "She's called 17 times. She came to the office in person yesterday and caused quite a scene in the lobby. She's making claims that you stole money from your family, that you're mentally unstable, that you're abusing drugs. Horror washed over me. None of that is true. She's lying. I left home and she's retaliating. I understand there may be a family situation, Mr. Patterson said gently. But yesterday, your mother made threats about taking legal action against the company for employing someone she called a thief and a criminal. Our office manager feels this has become too much of a liability risk. I'm sorry, Carly. I really am. But the decision has been made. He handed me a box. My hands trembled as I packed up the few personal items from my desk. A photo of Jenna and me at the beach. A coffee mug. A small succulent plant that was already dying. Security escorted me out of the building like I was a criminal, past the curious stares of my coworkers. I sat in my car in the parking lot, that box on my lap, and tried to process what had just happened. My mother had deliberately sabotaged my job. She had called my workplace over and over, had shown up in person to create chaos, all to get me fired, all to destroy my ability to support myself, all to force me to come crawling back. I lost my health insurance that day. I lost my steady income of $38,000 a year, and my car payment of $220 was due in 5 days. I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't even think about it. I just drove there, fury pushing me forward. I parked in the driveway and marched to the front door. I pounded on it with my fist. Dad opened it, his expression cold. What do you want? I want Mom to stop interfering with my life. She got me fired. Mom appeared behind Dad, her hand fluttering to her chest in mock surprise. Fired? Oh, honey, I was just worried about you. I called to make sure you were okay. How was I supposed to know they would overreact like that? You called 17 times. You went there in person. You told them I was a thief and a drug addict. I was concerned, Mom said, her voice saccharine sweet. You stormed out on Christmas. You won't answer our calls. We're your parents. We have a right to be worried. You destroyed my job. You've been stealing my money. You drained my savings account. Dad's face hardened. We don't know what you're talking about. You've always been dramatic, Carly. Making up stories, playing the victim. Behind them, I could see Madison in the doorway to the kitchen. Her phone pointed at me, recording. She was smirking. If you just came home and helped out like you're supposed to, Mom said, none of this would be necessary. We're a family. Family takes care of each other. You mean I take care of you? I said. That's all I've ever been to you. Someone to pay your bills. We gave you everything, Dad said, his voice rising. We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay us? By abandoning us? I looked at their faces and realized with perfect clarity that they would never stop. They would never see me as their daughter. They would never acknowledge what they had done. To them, I was just a resource that had stopped cooperating. I turned and walked back to my car. My phone buzzed as I drove away. Madison had already posted the video to Facebook with the caption, "Drama Queen's sister having a meltdown." When I got back to Jenna's apartment, she was waiting with a worried expression. Her boyfriend stood behind her, arms crossed. "Carly," Jenna said softly, "we need to talk. Ryan's moving in next month. We're going to need the apartment to just be us. I'm so sorry. Can you find somewhere else by the end of January?" That gave me 3 weeks. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad's number, even though I had blocked it. He must have figured out how to override the block. The mortgage payment is late. We're counting on you. Family takes care of family. 1 month after Christmas, I was living in my car. Jenna had been apologetic when I left, pressing $200 into my hand that I didn't want to take but had no choice. Her boyfriend had made it clear I wasn't welcome, and I understood. They needed their space. I was grateful for the 2 weeks she had given me, but those 2 weeks hadn't been enough to find a place. Without a job, no landlord would rent to me. Without an address, getting a new job was almost impossible. I was caught in a circle I couldn't break. I parked in different locations every night. Behind closed shopping centers, in hospital parking lots where overnight parking was common, at rest stops on the highway. I learned which places were safe, which ones the police patrolled. I kept my car clean and my belongings minimal. 2 suitcases in the trunk, a pillow and blanket in the back seat. I showered at a cheap gym I had signed up for, $20 a month. I ate dollar menu items from fast food places and whatever I could get from the food pantry downtown. I applied to every job I could find. Retail, food service, warehouses, anything. But every application asked if I had been fired from my last job and why. Every application required references. And every background check would show my current situation, my lack of permanent address. My phone service was about to be cut off because I couldn't pay the bill. I had $32 left to my name. The car smelled like old French fries and desperation, and I could see that smell starting to cling to my clothes, to my hair, no matter how often I showered at the gym. Then, finally, a miracle. A call back from Bright Care Medical, a medical supply company I had applied to 3 weeks earlier. The hiring manager, a woman named Sharon, wanted to interview me in person. I spent my last $10 at a laundromat, washing and drying my nicest interview outfit. I used the gym shower and spent extra time making sure I looked professional. I drove my dying car to their office, praying it would make the trip without breaking down completely. The interview went better than I could have hoped. Sharon was impressed with my experience in medical billing. We talked for over an hour about the position, about healthcare systems, about insurance protocols. She laughed at my jokes. She nodded along with my answers. I felt like myself again for the first time in weeks, like someone who had value, who had skills, who was more than just a person sleeping in her car. At the end of the interview, Sharon smiled. "Carly, I think you're exactly what we need here. I'd like to offer you the position. Customer service representative, $42,000 a year, full health benefits, paid time off, pending a standard background check, of course." I almost cried right there in her office. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you start a week from Monday?" "Absolutely." I walked out of that building feeling like I could breathe again. $42,000, benefits, a real job. I could do this. I could get an efficiency apartment, something small and cheap. I could rebuild my life. I could prove to myself that I didn't need my family, that I could make it on my own. For 3 days, I felt hope. Real, genuine hope. I went to the library and researched apartments in my price range. I made a budget. I calculated how much I could save each month. I even allowed myself to imagine what my life might look like in 6 months, a year, 5 years. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. Sharon from Bright Care Medical. Her voice sounded strained. "Carly, I need to ask you about something serious." My heart sank. "Okay." "I had visitors this morning at the office. They said they were your parents and your sister." No. They told me some very concerning things. They said you have a history of theft and fraud. They brought documentation. They said if we hired you, they would expose the company for employing a criminal. They refused to leave until security intervened. Sharon, none of that is true. They're lying. They've been sabotaging me because I left home and stopped paying their bills. I believe you, Carly. I really do. But our legal department is concerned about the liability. They're worried about these people continuing to harass the company. I'm so sorry, but I have to rescind the job offer. The words hit me like physical blows. Please, I need this job. I'm living in my car. I have nothing. I'm sorry. Sharon's voice broke. I wish there was something I could do. I really do think you would have been great here, but my hands are tied. She hung up. I sat in my car in the library parking lot, staring at nothing. Every time I tried to stand up, they knocked me back down. Every time I found a way forward, they blocked it. They were hunting me, systematically destroying every opportunity, every chance I had to escape. I drove to my parents' house one more time. I don't know what I was hoping for. Maybe that they would see what they were doing to me and stop. Maybe that they would show even a shred of human decency. I banged on the door. Dad opened it. his expression bored. "We'll stop when you come home and do your part," he said, flatly. Mom appeared beside him. "We gave you everything, Carly. You owe us. It's simple math." Then they presented me with a piece of paper, an itemized list. Every year I had lived at home as an adult. Calculated rent they said I should have paid. Food costs, utilities, insurance. They had added it all up. $53,000, Dad said. "That's what you owe us. Come home and work it off, or pay us back. Your choice." Madison appeared in the hallway behind them. Phone out, recording again. "This is what being independent looks like?" she taunted. I took the paper from their hands, looked at their cold faces, and walked away. There was no reaching them. There was no appealing to their love or conscience, because they had neither. Not for me. That night, I parked behind a closed shopping center and tried to sleep. My phone buzzed with an email notification. My car insurance had been canceled. I opened the email, my hands shaking. Someone had called my insurance company, claimed to be me, and canceled my policy effective immediately. I was now driving illegally without insurance, in a car with a failing transmission, with nowhere to go and no money to fix anything. My phone buzzed again. Mom's text, with a smile emoji. "Having fun yet?" They were playing with me, like a cat with a mouse. They could have just let me go, let me disappear from their lives. But they didn't want that. They wanted me broken, desperate, begging to come back. They wanted to win. 2 weeks later, I had found temp work through a labor agency. Warehouse work, paid in cash at the end of each day. $50 for 8 hours of moving boxes, no questions asked. It was exhausting. Physical work that left my back aching and my hands blistered. But it was money. Barely enough to keep gas in my car and food in my stomach. But something. I was still living in my car, still moving locations every night. But I had fallen into a rhythm. I had learned which gas station bathrooms were cleanest, which parking lots were safest, which food pantries didn't ask too many questions. My family had been quiet for several days. No calls from strange numbers, no surprise visits to potential employers. I thought maybe they had finally given up, moved on, decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. I should have known better. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, when the flashlight beam hit my window. I jerked awake, disoriented, my heart pounding. 2 police officers stood outside my car, parked behind a grocery store where I had felt safe enough to sleep. "Ma'am, please step out of the vehicle." I got out, my legs shaky, my mind racing. "Is something wrong, officer?" "License and registration, please." I handed them over with trembling hands. One officer went back to his patrol car to run my information. The other stayed with me, his flashlight scanning my back seat with its pillow and blanket. "Living in your car?" he asked, not unkindly. "Temporarily. I'm between places." He nodded. The first officer came back, his expression more serious now. "Ma'am, there's a warrant for your arrest." "What? For what?" "Unpaid credit card debt. $3,200. You missed a court date for a debt collection lawsuit." "I don't have a credit card. I never got any court notice. I don't know anything about this." But they weren't interested in my explanations. They handcuffed me, read me my rights, and put me in the back of their patrol car. They towed my car with everything I owned inside it. At the police station, they booked me. Fingerprints, mugshot, the works. They put me in a holding cell with 3 other women. I sat on the metal bench, my mind spinning. I had never owned a credit card. I had always been too nervous about debt. But somehow, somewhere, there was a credit card in my name that I knew nothing about. I couldn't afford bail. It was set at $1,000, which might as well have been $1 million. I spent the night in that cell, listening to the other women's stories, wondering how my life had spiraled this far out of control. In the morning, a public defender came to see me. Her name was Kelly, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes. "Okay, let's see what we're dealing with," she said, flipping through paperwork. "Credit card opened 3 years ago. Address on the application is." She looked up at me. This is your parents' address? I was living there 3 years ago, but I never opened a credit card. Kelly kept reading. All the bills were sent to that address. All the court notices were sent there too. You never received any of this? No. I never knew any of it existed. She leaned back in her chair. Carly, I think you might be a victim of identity theft. This looks like someone opened this card in your name, used it, never paid it, and intercepted all the mail so you wouldn't find out. My family, I whispered. We can't prove that yet, but I'm going to get you released on your own recognizance. The judge will see you've been cooperative, no prior record. Then we need to deal with this debt issue and figure out who's responsible. By afternoon, I was released. But the damage was done. I now had an arrest record. Any future job applications would see this. Any background check would flag me as someone with legal problems, unpaid debts, a warrant for arrest. I used the library computers to pull my free annual credit report. What I found made me physically sick. 3 credit cards, all opened while I was living at home, all with my parents' address. Total debt across all 3, $11,700. Every single one had gone into collections. Every single one had judgments against me. I requested copies of the original applications from the credit card companies. When they arrived by email, I saw signatures that looked like my mother's handwriting, not mine. Personal information that only my family would have known. Security questions with answers about my childhood that I had never set up. My family had been systematically stealing my identity for years, destroying my credit, racking up debt in my name, all while I lived under their roof, trusting them, helping them, paying their bills. I thought about going to the police, filing a report for identity theft. But Kelly, my public defender, had warned me. It's complicated when it's family. They'll say you knew about it. They'll say you lived at the address where all the mail went. They'll say you must have seen the cards, the bills. It becomes a he said, she said situation, and prosecutors don't like to touch those. That night, I sat in my car, looking at all the evidence. Copies of applications with forged signatures, credit reports showing years of fraud, bank statements showing the systematic theft of my savings, my grandmother's will that I found online, showing the $15,000 she had left specifically to me, money that had disappeared when my parents were executors of her estate. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. We heard about your legal trouble. It was Mom's voice. Come home, honey. We'll help you fix this. All of this goes away if you just come back where you belong. I hung up without responding. But I finally understood their strategy completely. They had been grooming me since I was 21, breaking me down, making me dependent, destroying any path to independence. They wanted me trapped, helpless, with no choice but to return to them and continue funding their lifestyle while they told everyone what a burden I was. Madison got the new car. Madison got the college education. Madison got to be the success story. And I was supposed to be the workhorse in the background, paying for all of it, grateful for the privilege. I looked at my phone, at that last text from Mom with their address. Come home. We'll help you fix this. But they were the ones who broke it. And I was starting to realize that if I wanted to fix it, I couldn't do it alone. 1 week after my arrest, I stood outside the cramped office of Marcus Chen, an attorney with legal aid services. The social worker at the women's shelter where I had been staying, a kind woman named Patricia, had connected us. Marcus specialized in family fraud cases and worked pro bono for people who couldn't afford legal representation. His office was small and cluttered with case files, but his eyes were sharp and focused when he looked at me. Tell me everything, he said. I did. I told him about Christmas morning and the piggy bank with $3. I told him about the drained savings account and the job I lost. I told him about living in my car and the credit cards I never opened. I showed him every piece of evidence I had collected. Bank statements, credit reports, copies of forged applications, text messages, Facebook posts, everything. Marcus listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, he sat back in his chair. "This is extensive," he said quietly. "This isn't opportunistic theft. This is systematic, premeditated financial exploitation. They've been doing this for years. Can we prove it?" "I think so. But Carly, I need you to understand something. If we move forward with this, it's going to get ugly. Your family will fight back. They'll make you look like the villain. You might lose relationships with extended family members. This will be public and painful." "They've already made me the villain," I said. "They've already destroyed my life. I have nothing left to lose." Marcus nodded. "Then let's fight." Over the next week, Marcus launched a full investigation. He subpoenaed bank records and credit card statements. He requested documentation from my grandmother's estate. He tracked down the ATM locations where my money had been withdrawn and cross-referenced them with locations near my parents' house. He built a timeline of every fraudulent act, every theft, every act of sabotage. Then he found something I hadn't known about. "Carly," he said during one of our meetings, his voice careful, "did you know your father had a brother, Uncle Ray?" "Yeah, but we never saw him. My parents always said he was troubled, that he disappeared when I was a kid. They said he was on drugs and cut off the family." Marcus slid a document across his desk. "I tracked him down. He lives in Oregon now, and he's willing to testify." "Testify about what?" "Your parents did the same thing to him 15 years ago. Destroyed his credit, stole his inheritance from his parents, made him unemployable in the area. He finally gave up and left the state to start over. He's been no contact with them ever since." I stared at the document, a written statement from Uncle Ray describing in detail how my parents had systematically destroyed his financial life. The patterns were identical to what they had done to me. The same tactics, the same manipulation, the same cruelty. "It establishes a pattern of behavior," Marcus said. "This isn't a one-time mistake or misunderstanding. This is what they do." Marcus filed a police report on my behalf for identity theft, fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. He submitted all the evidence to the district attorney's office, and then we waited. I had moved into a transitional housing program with Patricia's help. A tiny efficiency apartment with subsidized rent for 6 months, giving people in crisis a chance to stabilize. It was the first time I had slept in a real bed in weeks. The first time I had a door I could lock, walls around me, a sense of safety. I got a part-time job at a small coffee shop run by a woman named Helen, who didn't do background checks and paid cash under the table. It wasn't much, but it was something. Helen was gruff but fair, and she didn't ask questions about my situation. One of the regular customers was a guy around my age named Ethan. He started chatting with me during slow periods, friendly and easy to talk to. He told me about his own family drama, his parents' bitter divorce, the custody battles over his younger siblings. We bonded over understanding how complicated families could be. "It's hard when the people who are supposed to love you just hurt you instead," he said one afternoon, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Yeah," I agreed, feeling seen for the first time in months. "It really is." Ethan started coming in more often, always sitting at the counter, always making me laugh. He introduced me to some of his friends who came by the shop. He brought me snacks during my shifts, helped cover for me when I needed a bathroom break or was exhausted. He felt like the first real friend I had made since everything fell apart. "I have a buddy who works in HR at a tech company," he mentioned one day. "If you're looking for something more stable than this, I could put in a word." "Really? That would be amazing." "Of course. You deserve better than this, Carly. You're smart and hardworking. You shouldn't be struggling like this." His words felt like a lifeline, like maybe, finally, something good was coming. 3 weeks into our friendship, I came into work for my shift and found Helen waiting with a devastated expression. "Carly, we need to talk." She led me to her tiny back office. On her desk were printed photos, transaction records, and a written statement. "Someone came in yesterday when you weren't working," Helen said, her voice tight. "They showed me evidence that you've been stealing from the register, that you've been pocketing cash, manipulating receipts, They had timestamps, transaction records, everything. My blood went cold. Helen, I haven't stolen anything. I swear. The person who brought this evidence was Ethan. The world tilted. What? He had videos, photos, documentation. He said he's been watching you for weeks because he suspected something was wrong. Carly, I don't want to believe it, but the evidence is pretty damning. Can I see it? She showed me. Photos of the register that looked like transactions had been voided incorrectly. Screenshots of text messages I had supposedly sent to friends bragging about taking money. Statements from witnesses who claimed to have seen me pocket cash. All of it was fake. All of it was doctored. But it looked real. I have to let you go, Helen said, her eyes sad. I can't afford to keep someone on staff that I can't trust. I'm sorry, Carly. I walked out of that coffee shop in a daze. I sat on the curb outside, trying to understand what had just happened. Ethan had befriended me, gained my trust, documented my entire routine, and then used it all to destroy me again. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hope you enjoyed your new friend. A photo attached. Ethan and Madison together, both smiling at the camera. They were sitting in Madison's new car. Another text. We'll never stop. Come home. Ethan was Madison's boyfriend. The entire friendship had been planned. He had been planted to get close to me, to gather information, to sabotage any progress I made. Every laugh we shared, every conversation about family pain, every moment I thought someone actually cared about me, it had all been a lie. They had recorded everything, twisted everything, used everything against me. I sat on that curb and felt something break inside me that was different from all the other breaks. This wasn't anger or sadness or fear. This was something deeper. This was the understanding that my family would infiltrate every aspect of my life. They would destroy every friendship, every job, every opportunity. They would never stop until I was so broken that I had no choice but to return to them. I went back to my efficiency apartment and sat on the floor. I had no job again, no prospects, no friends I could trust. The criminal case was moving slowly through the system. I had nothing. My phone rang. Marcus, my attorney. Carly, I need you to come to my office immediately. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. His voice had a note of triumph in it. I found something big. Marcus's office was more cluttered than usual when I arrived the next morning. Documents spread across every surface. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie loosened and coffee cups scattered around his desk. Sit down, he said, his eyes bright. You're not going to believe what I found. He pulled out a thick folder. I've been digging deeper into your parents' financial history, looking for patterns. I found your uncle, which was huge. But then I started wondering, if they did this to Ray 15 years ago and they did it to you now, what have they been doing in between? What did you find? A paper trail. Your parents have been running financial scams for years. Small things, mostly. Taking out loans in other people's names, borrowing money they never repaid, manipulating family members. But it's all there, documented, if you know where to look. He showed me printouts of loan applications, credit reports, court judgments. My parents had been sued 3 times by former friends for unpaid loans. They had defaulted on 2 car loans. They had a history of writing bad checks. But here's the important part, Marcus said, pulling out another document. I subpoenaed Madison's phone records as part of our case. Look at these text messages. He showed me printed screenshots. Texts between Madison and Mom, planning the Ethan setup in explicit detail. Get your boyfriend to befriend her. Document everything. We need to make sure she has nowhere else to go. Break her down until she comes crawling back. There were texts between Mom and Dad discussing which of my job prospects to sabotage and how. Messages about canceling my car insurance. Plans to steal my debit card and drain my account. Everything laid out in their own words. Documented. Undeniable. They were so confident you'd never see these, Marcus said. They never thought you'd have the resources to fight back. They thought they could keep you helpless forever. Can we use this? Absolutely. This establishes intent, conspiracy, and premeditation. This isn't just fraud. This is calculated. Ongoing harassment and abuse with the intent to control and manipulate you. Combined with your uncle's testimony and all the other evidence, we have a solid case. What happens now? Now, Vigo Public. Marcus had been in contact with a local news reporter who specialized in human interest stories. The reporter, a woman named Alicia, was interested in covering adult children, fighting back against financially abusive parents. It's a story people need to hear, Marcus explained. Elder abuse gets a lot of attention, but adult children being exploited by their parents is more common than people think, and nobody talks about it. I was terrified of going public, but Marcus convinced me that controlling the narrative was important. If I told my story first, honestly, and with evidence, it would be harder for my parents to spin their version. The interview aired on the local news 2 weeks later. I spoke about the Christmas morning with the $3, about discovering my drained savings, about living in my car, and being arrested for debts I never knew existed. I showed the credit card applications with forged signatures. I talked about the systematic sabotage of every job, every friendship, every chance I had to rebuild. The story went viral. Not just locally, but nationally. People shared it on social media with comments like, "This happened to me too," and "My parents did the same thing." The comments section filled with hundreds of people sharing their own stories of family exploitation. The public response shifted everything. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. Suddenly, there was a community of people who understood, who believed me, who had survived similar abuse and come out the other side. My extended family members started reaching out, quietly at first in private messages. My Aunt Sarah called me crying, apologizing for believing my parents' version of events. "I always thought something was wrong," she said, "but I was too afraid to say anything. I'm so sorry." One of my father's cousins came forward with information about money my parents had borrowed from him and never repaid. A former family friend contacted Marcus with documentation of a loan scam my parents had run on them. More victims emerged, people my parents had manipulated and stolen from over the years. The district attorney's office took notice. With the media attention and the mounting evidence, they assigned a dedicated prosecutor to the case. Criminal charges were filed. Identity theft, fraud, forgery, embezzlement. The court case moved forward. My parents hired an expensive attorney, which was ironic, considering they always claimed to be broke. Their attorney sent a cease and desist letter, threatening to sue me for defamation and emotional distress. But Marcus wasn't intimidated. "Let them try," he said. "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and we have the truth documented in their own text messages." My parents launched their own social media campaign, posting tearful videos about their troubled daughter making false accusations. They painted themselves as victims of a vindictive child. Some people believed them. Some extended family members took their side, posting supportive comments about how parents deserve respect. But the tide of public opinion was largely against them. Too many people saw themselves in my story. Too many people had experienced similar abuse from their own families. The court date was set. Both the criminal charges and my civil case for restitution would be heard together. Marcus was confident but cautious. "They're going to come at you hard," he warned. "Their attorney is going to try to paint you as unstable, as a liar, as someone with an axe to grind. You need to be prepared for that." I was as prepared as I could be. I had the evidence. I had the truth. I had Uncle Ray willing to testify, and the other victims my parents had exploited over the years. I had text messages in my parents' own words proving their conspiracy. But 2 days before the court date, something happened that I didn't expect. Marcus called me, his voice tight. "We have a problem. Your parents are trying to settle." "Settle?" "They're offering to pay partial restitution if you drop the criminal charges and sign a non-disclosure agreement. They want this to go away quietly." "How much restitution?" $15,000. which is nowhere near what they actually stole from you, but their attorney is spinning it as generous under the circumstances. I thought about it. $15,000 would change my life right now. It would give me a real chance to start over. But it would also mean they got away with it. It would mean other victims would never get justice. It would mean the truth stayed buried. No, I said. We're going to court. Marcus smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say. The night before the court date, I lay in my efficiency apartment, staring at the ceiling. I thought about that Christmas morning that felt like a lifetime ago. The piggy bank with $3. My sister's new car. The moment I realized my family saw me as nothing more than a resource to be used, I thought about everything that had happened since. The stolen money, the sabotaged jobs, the homelessness, the arrest, the systematic destruction of every part of my life, the cruel infiltration of my friendship with Ethan, the years of exploitation and manipulation. And I thought about how I had survived all of it, how I had kept going, even when it seemed impossible, how I had found people like Jenna, Patricia, Helen, Marcus, and Uncle Ray who had helped me even though they didn't have to, how I had learned that chosen family could be stronger than blood. Tomorrow, I would face my parents in court. Tomorrow, I would tell my story to a judge. Tomorrow, I would fight back. And win or lose, I would walk out of that courtroom free. Because I already knew the truth about who they were and who I was. And that truth had set me free long before any court judgment could. My phone buzzed one last time that night. Mom's number, which I hadn't blocked because Marcus wanted to document any contact they made. It's not too late to come home. I deleted the message without responding. I was already home, right here, in this tiny apartment that was mine, with a door that locked and a life that belonged to me. I was already home. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out. I sat at a table next to Marcus, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, my parents sat with their attorney, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Dad stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. Madison sat behind them in the gallery, scrolling through her phone like she was bored. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and keen eyes, reviewed the case files before looking up at us. "This is an unusual case," she said. "We have both criminal charges and a civil suit being heard together due to the interconnected nature of the allegations. Let's proceed." The prosecutor went first, laying out the criminal charges: identity theft, fraud, forgery, embezzlement. She presented the credit card applications with forged signatures. She showed the bank records of my drained savings account. She called Uncle Ray to the stand. Uncle Ray was in his 50s now, gray at the temples, wearing a simple button-down shirt. He testified about what my parents had done to him 15 years ago, how they had stolen his identity, ruined his credit, and made it impossible for him to live in the same state as them. How he had spent years rebuilding his life from nothing. "They told everyone I was on drugs," he said quietly. "They told everyone I was crazy. But the truth was, I just wouldn't let them control me anymore. So they destroyed me and drove me away." My parents' attorney objected repeatedly, calling Uncle Ray's testimony irrelevant and prejudicial. But the judge allowed it, noting that it established a pattern of behavior. Then Marcus called me to the stand. I told my story from the beginning. Christmas morning, the $3 in the piggy bank, everything that came after. I kept my voice steady even when I talked about living in my car, about the arrest, about Ethan's betrayal. Marcus showed the judge the text messages between Madison and Mom, planning the Ethan setup. He showed Dad's texts demanding money. He showed the documentation of every fraudulent account, every stolen dollar, every act of sabotage. My parents' attorney cross-examined me aggressively. He tried to suggest I was exaggerating, that I was a disgruntled daughter angry about not getting a car for Christmas, that I had known about the credit cards, and was trying to avoid responsibility now. But Marcus had prepared me. I answered every question calmly, referring back to the evidence. When the attorney suggested I must have seen the credit card bills since they were mailed to a house where I lived, I explained that my parents controlled all the mail, and I never saw any bills that weren't addressed directly to me in my room. The trial lasted 2 days. Other witnesses testified. The friend my parents had scammed with a fake loan, a neighbor who had lent them money they never repaid, a former co-worker of Dad's who testified about his pattern of borrowing money from colleagues and disappearing. The prosecutor presented evidence that my grandmother had left me $15,000 in her will, money that had vanished while my parents were executors of the estate. My parents' attorney tried to claim it had been spent on legitimate estate expenses, but couldn't produce any documentation to prove it. On the second day, the judge asked if my parents wanted to testify in their own defense. Their attorney advised them not to, which Marcus said was smart. "Anything they say can only hurt them at this point," he whispered to me. Finally, the judge called for closing arguments. The prosecutor spoke about the systematic nature of the abuse, the premeditation, the cruelty of parents exploiting their own daughter. Marcus spoke about the devastating impact on my life, about the years of work it would take to rebuild what they had destroyed. My parents' attorney argued that this was a family dispute being blown out of proportion, that parents have a right to expect adult children to contribute to household expenses, that I was an ungrateful daughter who refused to help my aging parents. The judge listened to everything, her expression neutral. Then she called a short recess to review all the evidence. When we reconvened an hour later, the courtroom was silent as the judge spoke. "I have reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented in this case. The documentation is extensive and damning. We have forged signatures on credit card applications. We have text messages explicitly planning acts of sabotage against the plaintiff. We have testimony from multiple witnesses, establishing a pattern of financial exploitation spanning decades. We have proof of stolen inheritance funds. This is not a simple family dispute. This is calculated, ongoing financial abuse and fraud." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. On the criminal charges, I find the defendants guilty of identity theft, fraud, and forgery. I sentence them to 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and order permanent fraud flags placed on their credit files to prevent them from victimizing others. My mother started crying. Real tears this time, not the fake ones she had been dabbing at earlier. On the civil claims, I find in favor of the plaintiff. The defendants are ordered to pay full restitution of $58,000, representing all stolen funds, fraudulent debts, and damages. This includes the $15,000 inheritance that was misappropriated. Payment plans will be arranged through the court. I felt Marcus squeeze my shoulder. "We won," he whispered. The judge wasn't finished. "Additionally, I am granting a permanent restraining order. The defendants and their daughter Madison are prohibited from contacting the plaintiff directly or indirectly, from coming within 500 feet of her residence or workplace, and from any further acts of harassment or interference." My parents were led away by a court officer to process their probation terms. Madison stormed out of the courtroom, her phone already to her ear. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. I had won. After everything they had done, after all the pain and sabotage and cruelty, I had actually won. Outside the courtroom, news cameras were waiting. Alicia, the reporter who had first covered my story, approached with her cameraman. "Carly, how do you feel about the verdict?" I thought about what to say. I feel like I can finally breathe, like I can finally start rebuilding my life without looking over my shoulder. What would you say to other people in similar situations? That you're not crazy, that financial abuse by family members is real, that you don't owe your parents your destruction just because they raised you, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and save yourself. The story aired that night. My phone, which I had finally been able to afford to keep active, buzzed with messages from people thanking me for speaking out, sharing their own stories, telling me I had given them hope. Over the next few months, things slowly began to change. My parents, forced to sell assets to begin paying restitution, sold Madison's car. That small piece of justice felt sweet. I used the first payment of restitution to pay off the fraudulent debts and start rebuilding my credit. A woman who had seen my story reached out through Marcus. She was the HR director at a medical software company. She said they specifically wanted to hire me because of my resilience and courage. Anyone who can survive what you survived and still keep fighting is exactly the kind of person we want on our team, she told me. I started the job 6 weeks after the trial. Good salary, health benefits, room for growth. I worked hard, proved myself, and found that when I wasn't being sabotaged at every turn, I was actually very good at what I did. I moved out of transitional housing and into a small one-bedroom apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I furnished it slowly, piece by piece. A couch from a thrift store. A bed frame I assembled myself. Curtains I hung with my own hands. I started therapy with a counselor who specialized in family trauma. It was hard work, confronting all the ways I had been manipulated and abused, learning to trust again, understanding that what happened wasn't my fault. I joined a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents. Listening to other people's stories, I realized how common this type of abuse was. How many people were suffering in silence, thinking they were alone. I made real friends there, people who understood without needing explanations. Slowly, carefully, I learned to trust again. Not everyone, not quickly, but enough. I learned to recognize red flags. I learned to set boundaries. I learned that it was okay to put my own well-being first. Some extended family members reached out to apologize and reconnect. My Aunt Sarah became someone I could call when I needed to talk. Uncle Ray and I developed a relationship, bonding over our shared experience of surviving the same family. He became the family member I had always wished I had. Others never reached out. Some relatives chose to believe my parents' version of events no matter what evidence existed. I learned to be okay with that. I learned that I couldn't control what other people believed, only what I knew to be true. 1 year after that Christmas morning, I did something symbolic. I went to a store and bought myself a piggy bank. A beautiful ceramic one, painted with flowers. I brought it home and placed it on my bookshelf. Every week I put money into it. $10, $20, whatever I could spare. But this time, it was my money, my savings, my future. Nobody could take it from me. Nobody controlled it but me. I didn't hear from my parents directly because of the restraining order, but I heard through others that they were bitter about the trial outcome, that they still told anyone who would listen that I was a terrible daughter, that I had ruined their lives. I didn't care anymore. Their opinion of me no longer had power. I had learned the most important lesson of all, that I didn't need their approval, their love, or their acceptance to be whole. I just needed my own. On Christmas morning, exactly 1 year later, I sat in my apartment with my small tree and twinkling lights. I made myself coffee and breakfast. I called Uncle Ray, and we talked for an hour. I texted my real friends, the ones I had chosen. I looked at that piggy bank on my shelf, now heavy with savings, and I smiled. Because I was free, truly, completely free. I thought about that moment 1 year ago when Mom handed me a piggy bank with $3 and called it a contribution to my future. She had no idea how right she was, just not in the way she intended. That moment had been my wake-up call. That moment had forced me to finally see them clearly. That moment had set me on a path to actual freedom. My parents had thought breaking me would bring me back under their control, but breaking me had actually been what saved me. Because once I had nothing left to lose, I found the courage to fight back. And in fighting back, I discovered I was stronger than they had ever let me believe. The life lesson I learned is this. Family is supposed to nurture you, not exploit you. Real love doesn't come with invoices and debt. Real parents want their children to thrive independently, not remain dependent and broken. And sometimes, the family you choose is more real than the family you were born into. You don't owe anyone your destruction. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. You are allowed to save yourself. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they share your DNA. You are allowed to choose peace over obligation. And if you're in a situation like I was, know this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not the problem. And yes, it is possible to rebuild. It's hard. It's painful. It takes time. But it is possible. You can survive this and come out stronger on the other side. I look at my life now and barely recognize the girl who stood in that living room on Christmas morning, holding a piggy bank with $3, watching her sister get a car. That girl was broken and defeated. This woman is whole and free, and that makes all the difference. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from family for your own well-being? How did you find the strength to do it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with the same decision. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps other people who need to hear this message find it. And subscribe to this channel for more stories about overcoming difficult family situations and finding strength in the hardest moments. Share this video with anyone you think might need to hear it. Sometimes, knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brought you some comfort, some validation, or some hope. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect and love, always. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next one.